Radiohead's story didn't begin on a world stage or with a chart-topping hit. It started in an Oxford schoolroom in 1985, 5 teenagers squeezing dreams into Friday rehearsals. The official story is simple. Shy students become superstars. But the truth is more tangled. Creep was an accident. Legal battles shadowed their first success, and early demos nearly vanished into obscurity. How did these outsiders ignite a revolution that would terrify record executives and inspire entire generations? The answer begins long before Radiohead was even a name, right where everything seemed most ordinary. Abingdon School, in 1985, was hardly a breeding ground for rock stars. 5 students, Tom Yorke, Colin Greenwood, Ed O'Brien, Phil Selway, and later Johnny Greenwood, found their escape in the school's cramped music room, gathering every Friday simply because that's when the space was free. They called themselves On a Friday, a name that stuck as long as their rehearsal schedule did. Early on, their ambitions were scribbled in yearbooks and passed around in cassettes, with Yorke's handwriting often scrawled across the tape sleeves. The band's chemistry was raw but unmistakable. Yorke's single-minded focus, Colin's quiet steadiness, O'Brien's knack for harmonies, Selway's calm behind the kit, and Johnny's restless curiosity. He first joined on keyboard, then stunned everyone with his guitar work. Demo tapes from these years capture a wild blend of influences: R.E.M., The Smiths, Talking Heads, filtered through their own awkward energy. They missed parties, skipped out on school events, and instead poured themselves into rehearsals, sometimes getting scolded for playing too loud, or charged extra for using the room after hours. In 1991, their Manic Hedgehog demo, named after a local record shop, began circulating in Oxford, drawing the attention of managers Chris Hufford and Bryce Edge. What started as a Friday ritual was slowly turning into something more, built on shared trust and the stubborn belief that their music mattered. EMI executives heard the Manic Hedgehog demo and moved quickly, offering a deal in 1991 that came with one catch: the band would need a new name. Inspired by a Talking Heads song, they became Radiohead. The ink was barely dry on the contract when they found themselves in Chipping Norton studios, recording what they thought was just another demo. Tom Yorke brought in a song he'd written at university, raw, self-doubting, and, by his own admission, a bit of a downer. The band played Creep as a warm-up, not realising producer Paul Coldery was already rolling tape. Johnny Greenwood, thinking the take was too polite, slammed into his guitar between verses, trying to disrupt the song. Instead, his blasts of distortion became its signature. The studio erupted in applause. Coldery pushed EMI to release Creep as the debut single in September 1992. At first, it flopped in the UK, even getting banned by the BBC for being too depressing. But an Israeli DJ put it on repeat, and soon it was climbing charts worldwide. Suddenly, Radiohead were everywhere. MTV late night radio, the US college circuit. The band felt like outsiders to their own success. Tom Yorke later said, "It's like it's not our song anymore." The whirlwind brought unexpected headaches. The Hollies songwriters claimed Creep borrowed too much from the air that I breathe. After a legal settlement, Albert Hammond and Mike Hazelwood were added as co-writers, splitting royalties. The band bristled at the attention and the pressure to follow up with another hit. For Yorke, the taste of fame was already bittersweet. Pressure mounted as Radiohead entered the studio to record their second album, The Bends. The memory of Creep still lingered, but the band's confidence was fragile. Producer John Leckie watched as Tom Yorke struggled, especially with a new song called Fake Plastic Trees. Sessions dragged on. Yorke's frustration boiled over one night, leading Leckie to suggest a drastic approach. Strip everything back, just voice and guitar. Yorke played 3 takes, each one more raw than the last. After the final take, he broke down in tears. That recording became the heart of the song, layered later with subtle strings and the rest of the band. The breakthrough was more than technical, it was emotional. The band found a new sense of trust, pushing beyond the shadow of their early hit. The Bends, released in 1995, showed a leap in artistry. Songs like High and Dry and Street Spirit, Fade Out, revealed greater depth, both in sound and in York's lyrics. The album's mix of vulnerability and ambition silenced doubts about one-hit wonder status. Critics and fans noticed the shift. For the first time, Radiohead felt like a band with a future, not just a fluke. The bends set the stage for even bolder risks ahead. OK Computer landed in May 1997, and the world took notice. Critics in London, New York, and Tokyo rushed to declare it a masterpiece, with headlines calling Radiohead the voice of a generation. Within weeks, the album topped year-end lists from NME, Mojo, and Rolling Stone. Its sound, lush, layered, and uneasy, felt like a dispatch from the future. Tracks like Paranoid Android, with its shifting moods and time signatures, and No Surprises, with its lullaby melody and bleak undertones, captured a sense of modern anxiety that resonated far beyond the UK. Karma Police became an anthem, played across airwaves and shouted back at the band by festival crowds from Glastonbury to Fuji Rock. The acclaim went beyond sales or chart positions. Journalists described the album as a turning point, arguing that OK Computer redefined what a rock band could be. The band's willingness to experiment, layering analog synths over guitars, using ambient noise as texture, invited comparisons to Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon. But the album's themes felt unmistakably current. Technology's cold embrace, the isolation of city life, the loss of human connection. Tom York's lyrics, sometimes cryptic, sometimes painfully direct, struck a chord with listeners trying to make sense of the digital age. By the end of 1997, OK Computer had won the Mercury Prize nomination and the Grammy for Best Alternative Album. It was named Album of the Year by outlets across Europe and America. Decades later, it remains a fixture on greatest albums lists, often cited as the defining record of the 1990s. For Radiohead, the success brought new expectations, and a sense that everything was about to change again. The OK Computer tour stretched from summer 1997 into the following year, crossing continents and time zones with barely a pause. At first, the band moved through airports and arenas in a kind of daze, propelled by the momentum of their newfound acclaim. But the pace quickly became unsustainable. Footage from the period, later compiled in the documentary Meeting People is Easy, captures the toll in real time. Tom York, slumped in dressing rooms, eyes hollow, scribbling in notebooks about feeling like a ghost. Backstage, the band's conversations are clipped, their laughter strained. Interviews blur together, each question about the meaning of their music landing with a little less patience. Tour medics began to worry about York's health. He lost weight and struggled to sleep, sometimes not eating for days. Crew members recall moments when he disappeared for hours, only to return looking more withdrawn. The rest of the band fared little better. Ed O'Brien described waking up in hotel rooms unsure of which country he was in. Johnny Greenwood, usually restless and inventive, grew quiet. The endless cycle of sound checks, interviews, and flights left them numb. The sense of alienation ran deeper than physical exhaustion. Radiohead's music, which had always explored themes of isolation and anxiety, now seemed to mirror their own lives. In one scene from the documentary, York watches footage of himself on stage and mutters, "That's not me." The band's world had shrunk to green rooms, hotel corridors, and the constant flash of cameras. Success, once a distant dream, now felt like a trap. By the end of 1998, the band was running on fumes. The relentless schedule had left little room for friendship or reflection. Instead of celebration, there was only fatigue and a growing sense that something had to give. The cameras kept rolling, but the band was already thinking about escape, about shutting out the world and finding a way to make music on their own terms again. Inside a converted barn in the English countryside, Radiohead began to dismantle everything they knew about making music. Burned out from touring and wary of repeating themselves, the band traded guitars and drums for synthesizers, samplers, and a tangle of cables. Tom York arrived with fragments, unfinished lyrics, brief melodies, half-formed ideas, rather than complete songs. Instead of jamming as a group, they recorded hours of improvisation, then sifted through the results, pulling out seconds-long snippets to build new tracks. Jonny Greenwood, restless as ever, became the architect of this sonic overhaul. He introduced the Ondes Martineau, a rare electronic instrument with a ghostly wail, and coaxed strange textures from the EMS Synthi, AKS, an analog synthesizer famous for its unpredictable sounds. Greenwood also used custom Max/MSP software patches to twist and randomize audio in real time, sometimes coding routines between takes. The band sampled everything: radio static, snippets of speech, the hum of studio equipment. On Everything in Its Right Place, York's vocals were chopped, looped, and layered until they became pure sound, almost unrecognizable. For Idiotech, Greenwood dug through experimental electronic records and found a sample from Paul Lansky's Mild und Leiser, then processed it into a jittery, anxious rhythm. Drums and bass lines were often assembled from tiny edited fragments, spliced together in Pro Tools rather than played live. Nigel Godrich, working as both producer and co-conspirator, kept the tape rolling through long stretches of trial and error. The studio became less a rehearsal space and more a laboratory, with cables snaking across the floor and screens flickering late into the night. Finished tracks sounded nothing like the band's earlier work, layered, abstract, and unsettling. The process was slow and sometimes frustrating, but it brought relief from the pressures of expectation and chart success. When Kid A finally arrived in 2000, it was clear Radiohead had left the world of rock behind, forging a new identity from the pieces they'd gathered and reshaped in that barn. Nigel Godrich first met Radiohead as a young engineer, quietly helping with late-night sessions on the bends. He became their trusted collaborator, known for an approach that welcomed accidents and happy mistakes. In the studio, Godrich rarely imposed his will. Instead, he listened, coaxed, and sometimes let the tape roll long after others would have called it a night. Band members began to see him as a sixth member, someone who could translate their chaos into something coherent. Jonny Greenwood once described Godrich as the only person who could tell Tom when he was being too precious or when we were just going in circles. Godrich's method was rooted in patience and a willingness to embrace the unpredictable. He encouraged the band to leave in the hiss of a headphone leak or the creak of a chair if it added character. During the making of OK Computer, the band would spend hours layering sounds, only for Godrich to pull everything back to its essentials, revealing the emotional core beneath the noise. He kept detailed notes on textures and arrangements, but he also trusted the band's instincts, knowing when to push for another take and when to let a raw, imperfect moment stand. This mindset became even more important as Radiohead moved into more experimental territory. In the Kid A sessions, Godrich's openness to non-traditional recording, sampling, digital cut-ups, and ambient noise helped the band find unity in their wildest ideas. He'd encouraged Jonny to run the Ondes Martineau through a battered old amp, or suggest that Tom's fragmented vocals be left unpolished. Mistakes weren't erased, they were often celebrated. Godrich's presence brought a quiet confidence, making it possible for the band to take risks without losing their sense of direction. Over decades, Godrich has remained a constant. His fingerprints are on every album from OK Computer forward, shaping their sound without ever overshadowing it. In interviews, the band credits him with holding them together when sessions threatened to spiral out of control. For Radiohead, Godrich is more than a producer. He's the anchor that lets them drift into the unknown, knowing there's always someone listening for the hidden thread that ties it all together. On October 10th, 2007, Radiohead released In Rainbows straight from their website, inviting fans to pay whatever they wanted, even nothing at all. The download page crashed within minutes, overwhelmed by demand. Over 1 million people rushed to claim the album in its first days. Some paid £40 for the deluxe disc box, others entered zero and clicked download. The band had no record label, no price tag, and no traditional release plan. Their former label, EMI, blindsided, scrambled to respond. Internal emails from industry executives called the move a threat to the entire business, while trade magazines debated whether this was the beginning of the end for album sales. Critics and analysts argued over the numbers. Comscore reported that 62% of downloaders paid nothing, and the average price hovered around $2.26. Yet, when In Rainbows hit stores months later, it topped charts in the UK and US, selling more than 3 million copies worldwide by the end of 2008. Tom York later said, "The band made more from the digital release than from all their previous albums' online sales combined." For Radiohead, the experiment wasn't just about money, it was about control, about proving that art and commerce didn't have to follow old rules. The industry, still reeling, was left with a new question: what happens when the artists hold all the cards? Radiohead's reach extends far beyond their own albums. Each member has carved out a distinct creative path, feeding back into the band's reputation as restless innovators. Tom York's solo work, from the electronic textures of The Eraser to film scores like Suspiria and Confidenza, has drawn praise for its daring and vulnerability. Jonny Greenwood's parallel career as a composer has earned him an Oscar nomination for Phantom Thread and an Ivor Novello Award for There Will Be Blood, with critics noting how his orchestral experiments echo the band's most adventurous moments. Ed O'Brien and Phil Selway have each released solo albums, with O'Brien's Earth shaped by his time in Brazil and Selway exploring intricate rhythms and songwriting. York and Greenwood, joined by Tom Skinner, launched The Smile, pushing yet another boundary in experimental rock. Their influence ripples outward. Artists like Billie Eilish, Lorde, and Bon Iver cite Radiohead as a blueprint for independence and sonic risk. Michael Stipe called them the greatest rock band of our era. In 2019, Radiohead was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, a rare moment of official recognition for a band that has always preferred to let the music speak for itself. In 2007, Radiohead's release of In Rainbows with a pay-what-you-want model changed how artists and fans interact, as confirmed by industry reports and direct statements from the band. Over more than 3 decades, their journey, from forming as On a Friday at Abingdon School in 1985, to the global impact of OK Computer, to the experimental leap of Kid A, has been documented in interviews, studio footage, and critical reviews. While the band's internal decision-making and future plans remain largely private, what is clear from public records is Radiohead's influence on artists, from Coldplay to Billie Eilish, and their induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2019. Today, Radiohead's legacy is seen in both the evolution of digital music distribution and the creative risks taken by a new generation. Their story, built on documented innovation and resilience, continues to shape modern music.